In the beginning, long before oceans formed and continents took shape, the Earth was only fire, a newborn sphere of molten rock suspended in the quiet darkness of space. For millions of years, it churned and boiled beneath swirling clouds of hot gas, forming a world that looked nothing like the calm surface we know today. Back then, nothing lived on the planet. No forests, no animals, not even the earliest microbes. Only endless oceans of magma stretching beneath a sky filled with poisonous vapor. The young Earth was a restless body of heat, constantly shedding energy into space as its crust attempted to cool. Slowly, drop by drop, the molten surface began to harden. A thin layer of solid rock appeared, fragile at first, like cooled wax floating on a sea of fire. This early crust cracked again and again under the pressure from below, breaking apart and reforming in a cycle as old as the planet itself. Each fracture allowed new lava to escape, creating fresh land only to bury it moments later. Deep inside Earth's interior, iron and other heavy metals sank downward under tremendous heat, forming a dense metallic core. Above it, lighter minerals floated upward to build the rocky layers that would one day become continents. Even now, that metallic heart continues to spin, generating a magnetic field that protects our atmosphere from the harsh breath of the sun. As the surface cooled further, water vapor condensed into clouds. Torrential rain fell across the planet for thousands of years without stopping. The water pooled into great basins, filling the first oceans. Lightning lit the sky, volcanoes erupted through forming crust, and the atmosphere slowly changed into something that might one day support life. But even then, Earth was far from peaceful. Beneath the thin crust, molten rock continued to flow slowly, driven by heat from the core. Vast plates of the Earth's surface began to drift, spreading apart in some places and colliding in others. With every movement, mountains rose, valleys opened, and deep cracks allowed fire to reach the surface. This restless motion created the landscapes that would eventually host all future life. The continents we walk on today are only the most recent arrangement of this endless drifting, which continues even now, silently beneath our feet. For billions of years, this process shaped the world without witness. While stars moved through the night sky and galaxies drifted across the void, Earth continued its slow, patient transformation. A world born in fire slowly cooled, preparing a stage for oceans, land, and eventually life itself. As you listen, imagine that distant world glowing in the dark, slowly breathing heat into space. Imagine the first calm oceans forming above a hidden sea of molten stone. Imagine the earliest crust, fragile and thin, trying to hold together a planet that was constantly moving beneath it. The story of Earth begins not with life, but with fire, and even now, beneath the quiet surface, that fire continues. As Earth cooled, enormous clouds of steam and volcanic gas filled the sky. Carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and countless other compounds wrapped the planet in a dense and poisonous atmosphere. Lightning flickered constantly across the horizon, striking oceans that were still warm from the heat of a young world. Those early oceans were nothing like the clear blue water we know today. They were dark, filled with minerals, and heated from the volcanic crust below. Hydrothermal vents released boiling water and chemicals into the sea, mixing with ancient rain that had fallen from skies filled with ash. For millions of years, storms swept across endless waters without a single moment of silence. The atmosphere thickened with moisture, and temperatures slowly began to fall. What had once been a furnace was becoming something calmer, still dangerous, still volatile, but changing in ways that would eventually make life possible. Volcanoes shaped everything during these early ages. Their eruptions released the gases that built Earth's forming atmosphere. Their heat kept the oceans warm enough for chemical reactions that could lead toward life. Even the continents that would one day rise beneath our feet began as volcanic rock, slowly piling layer upon layer. Deep below the surface, Earth's crust remained thin and weak. It cracked like cooling glass, allowing magma to escape through long fissures that formed underwater mountain chains. Over time, these underwater ridges created new land, pushing old crust aside in a slow but relentless motion. Today, that same process continues along the mid-ocean ridge, where Earth creates new crust every hour of every day. While the planet cooled above, its interior continued to churn. The slow flow of molten rock in the mantle drove the drifting of continents. It was a force that would shape every future coastline, every mountain range, and every ocean basin. Even in this early stage, Earth was not still. It breathed through its volcanoes and pulsed through its tectonic plates. Beneath the dark oceans, a hidden world of rock and heat prepared the foundation for everything to come. As millions of years passed, the atmosphere began to transform. Carbon dioxide dissolved into oceans, water vapor condensed into rain, sulfur and ash settled slowly out of the sky. The planet became cooler, the storms became less violent, and sunlight began to reach the surface for the first time. It was during this long silence that Earth entered its first calm period, a calm that stretched across millions of years, a calm in which the oceans grew deeper, the crust grew thicker, and the sky slowly cleared. The Earth, once a world of fire, was becoming a world of water, and within those ancient waters, something extraordinary was waiting to happen, something that would change the planet forever. As the oceans deepened and the violent heat of Earth began to ease, something remarkable took shape within the shadows of ancient waters. The planet, once a glowing sphere of molten stone, was now wrapped in oceans stretching farther than any horizon, and beneath their dark surfaces, the chemistry of life was slowly gathering. The air above still carried volcanic gases. Lightning struck the surface relentlessly, but something new was beginning to stir among waves warmed by the inner heat of the world. Even now, when we study the earliest rocks and minerals, tiny chemical traces remain, signatures left behind by processes that no longer exist in the same way. In those traces, scientists detect the earliest whispers of life. Not complex organisms, not plants or animals, but something far smaller, something far more ancient than anything alive today. The oceans held not only minerals and heat, but building blocks of biology formed from atoms scattered across the galaxy long before Earth was born. Inside those oceans, ancient chemical reactions assembled molecules capable of copying themselves. Long chains of elements linked and folded, driven by energy from underwater volcanoes and cosmic radiation from above. At first, these fragile patterns must have formed and disappeared countless times, unable to survive the violent currents of a young planet. But eventually, the right combination of chemistry, heat, and stability allowed something new to remain. That something was the earliest form of life, simple on the outside, but extraordinary in its potential. These first living entities were nothing like the organisms we know now. They were microscopic structures made of simple molecules, floating freely in water that was constantly stirred by volcanic heat. They could not swim, could not breathe in the way we think of breathing, and could not sense the world around them, but they could replicate, and in replication they discovered a form of persistence that would shape the future of the entire planet. Slowly, these fragile forms of life learned to survive the turbulence of their surroundings. They anchored to mineral surfaces near hydrothermal vents, clinging to the edges of underwater chimneys where superheated water met colder ocean currents. In those boundary zones, rich in chemical energy, the first metabolic reactions unfolded, transforming raw minerals into biological fuel. It was chemistry becoming biology, matter becoming life. For millions of years, Earth's oceans were dominated only by these microscopic pioneers. They drifted, reproduced, and evolved beneath skies that were still darkened by volcanic ash. The land above remained barren and lifeless. But under the water's surface, evolution had begun its slow, patient work. Every copy introduced tiny variations, and those variations allowed life to adapt to heat, pressure, and chemistry in ways no non-living matter could match. The oceans slowly filled with microbial colonies. Some learned to harvest chemical energy, while others adapted to survive near cooler waters farther from deep sea. Vents. Over unimaginable spans of time, these simple cells became more efficient. They learned to store energy, protect themselves, and divide in more reliable patterns. With every generation, life became slightly more complex, even though the organisms themselves remained invisible to the naked eye. Then something happened that would change everything. Life discovered sunlight. Somewhere in those ancient waters, certain microbes developed pigments capable of capturing energy from the sun. Photosynthesis had begun. At first, this process was slow and inefficient, little more than a new method of survival in shallow seas, but it allowed life to expand far beyond the reach of volcanic heat. For the first time, organisms could harvest energy directly from the light of a star. The significance of this change cannot be overstated. Sunlight is the most powerful energy source in the solar system. Once organisms learned to convert that energy into biological fuel, the future of life was secured. From this moment onward, the oceans were no longer dependent solely on volcanic chemistry. Instead, they became illuminated gardens of microscopic photosynthetic life. As photosynthesis spread, the atmosphere began to change again. Early microbes released oxygen as waste, a gas that was extremely poisonous to many ancient organisms, but essential for later evolutionary steps. At first, the oceans absorbed most of this oxygen, binding it with iron minerals, but over countless centuries, iron became saturated and oceans rusted into shades of deep red that stained the seafloor. Only then, when the oceans could absorb no more, oxygen began to leak into the atmosphere. This transformation took hundreds of millions of years, but eventually the sky above Earth turned into something capable of supporting future life. Oxygen levels remained low at first, just enough to reshape the chemistry of oceans and atmosphere, but slowly the world moved toward a composition that would one day allow animals to breathe. Still, the land above remained barren. Continents were little more than hot, volcanic surfaces battered by storms and radiation. Nothing lived on them. Life was still entirely confined to the waters below, where darkness offered protection from the intense ultraviolet rays of the young sun. Only deep beneath the waves could life truly flourish. During this time, Earth continued its quiet internal work. Beneath oceans and crust, tectonic plates moved relentlessly, forming underwater mountain chains that stretched across the planet. These long ridges carried new crust upward from the mantle, pushing older crust outward and downward. The continents drifted slowly across the surface, forming new shapes every few 100 million years. Meanwhile, life branched into countless microscopic forms, each adapting to a unique corner of the ocean. Some consumed chemicals, others consumed sunlight, still others consumed each other, marking the earliest steps toward complex interaction. These interactions formed primitive ecosystems, a concept simple by today's standards, yet monumental in its novelty. Over immense periods, some microbes began joining together in cooperative groups. They shared resources, protected one another, and eventually merged into larger, more complex cells. This merging was one of the most important events in biological history. What had once been separate organisms became parts of a greater cellular whole, combining internal chemistry, energy systems, and genetic material. These new cells were the ancestors of all complex life, everything from plants to animals to humans. Without this single evolutionary breakthrough, Earth might still be covered only in microbial mats drifting beneath endless seas. But instead, complexity took root. As eons passed, the oceans transformed into living laboratories. New forms of metabolism emerged. Cells developed internal structures to store energy, build membranes, and process information. They even created primitive communication systems, chemical signals that offered advantages during competition or cooperation. All of this occurred long before the first visible organisms swam through the water. For nearly 3 billion years, Earth belonged to microbes alone, and during that time, they shaped almost every major aspect of the planet. They altered its atmosphere, determined the chemistry of oceans, and laid the foundation for every organism that would ever exist. Even today, when we examine deep-sea vents, ancient minerals, and fossilized microbial structures, we see evidence of this early world. The planet beneath us still carries records of these first biological steps, tiny signatures preserved in rock, water, and atmosphere. The oceans remained the cradle of life for so long that the idea of land being empty seems almost peaceful in hindsight. No plants, no forests, no animals walked the silent surface. Only wind and water shaped continents. Only volcanoes reshaped landscapes. And above it all, the sun continued to shine on a world quietly preparing itself for the next chapter of evolution. As Earth rotated beneath a growing field of oxygen, new possibilities formed. The atmosphere thickened, radiation levels dropped, the surface cooled and became more stable. Slowly, oceans began supporting larger populations of increasingly complex cells, each generation carrying the memory of those that came before. And in time, these simple forms of life, born in darkness and raised by oceans lit from below, would begin to change again. They would stretch, branch, and evolve, eventually producing creatures capable of movement, sensation, and awareness. But for now, the oceans were content with their silent kingdom, a world beneath the waves, slowly preparing for something greater. Today, when we look up at the sky, breathe oxygen, or touch water, we are touching the legacy of those early oceans and the microscopic pioneers that once ruled them. Their descendants live within us, in every cell, as reminders of the ancient chemistry that gave rise to life. They are the oldest storytellers, whispering through the biology that shapes our world. And while the surface of Earth may appear calm compared to the fiery landscape of its youth, the oceans still carry echoes of that long transformation. They remain deep, mysterious, and full of secrets, just as they were billions of years ago when life first opened its eyes to a world not yet ready to be seen. Millions of years passed beneath ancient skies, and the world continued its slow transformation. The oceans that once dominated Earth now moved around growing pieces of land, shaped by volcanic activity and the shifting of tectonic plates. What had once been a single global ocean began to separate into vast basins, divided by rising mountain chains hidden beneath the water. As tectonic plates pushed against one another, molten rock rose from below. New land emerged from volcanic eruptions, creating island chains that stretched across the seas. These islands were bare at first, nothing more than dark rock cooling in wind and water. But over time, chemical reactions between minerals and the atmosphere began forming soil. From that soil, the earliest building blocks of future landscapes slowly developed, grain by grain. Meanwhile, deep within the oceans, life continued to advance. Complex cells learned to group together in colonies, each cell specializing in different tasks. Some processed sunlight, others stored energy. Still others built protective walls that allowed colonies to survive in more diverse environments. This cooperation allowed organisms to grow larger and more complex, slowly preparing life for a transition toward visible existence. By now, oxygen in the atmosphere had increased significantly. It remained far lower than modern levels, but it was already changing the chemistry of oceans and the behavior of life. In shallow waters, organisms used sunlight to build energy, and in doing so, released even more oxygen. This feedback loop slowly transformed the air above Earth, making it more suitable for future life while also contributing to enormous changes in global climate. On the ocean floor, strange ecosystems thrived around hydrothermal vents. These ecosystems existed independently of sunlight, relying instead on chemical energy from the deep earth. They formed some of the most ancient biological communities, and their descendants still exist today in the dark depths of modern oceans. They serve as reminders of a time when sunlight was scarce and life depended entirely on the internal heat of the planet. Yet most living organisms existed closer to light, forming thin layers across shallow seas. These layers captured sunlight, creating carpets of microbial communities that slowly built structures from minerals dissolved in water. Over millions of years, these structures accumulated into reefs unlike anything found today, long before coral ever existed. These ancient microbial reefs acted as biological cities, protecting organisms from currents and waves while supporting ever-growing populations. During this time, continents continued to drift slowly across the globe. They collided, broke apart, and collided again, driven by the deep motion of the mantle. Each collision forced land upward, creating enormous mountain ranges that rose towards the sky. Every peak that emerged carried the scars of ancient forces, recording the pressure and heat that shaped it. As mountains formed, erosion began carving them down. Wind, water, and ice slowly wore away their surfaces, transporting minerals and nutrients into rivers and oceans. These nutrients enriched coastal waters, supporting dense populations of photosynthetic organisms. In this way, geology and biology worked together to reshape Earth, each process influencing the other in cycles that spanned millions of years. The early atmosphere, once harsh and toxic, gradually became more stable. Clouds formed more consistently, storms calmed, lightning still struck oceans, but less often than before. The sky grew clearer as volcanic gases settled, allowing more sunlight to reach the surface. The world was becoming more recognizable, inching closer to the conditions we know today. Still, complexity progressed slowly. Life remained mostly microscopic, and the surface of the continents remained barren rock. But changes in oxygen would eventually allow something remarkable. Larger, more complex organisms began experimenting with new forms. They developed internal structures to process oxygen more efficiently. They strengthened their membranes. They changed their behaviors and environments. Eventually, some organisms developed the ability to move independently. Small flagella and cilia pushed them through water, giving them mobility for the first time. Movement allowed them to search for sunlight, avoid predators, and expand into new habitats. It was a small step physically, but a monumental leap evolutionarily. As Earth's climate changed, ice ages came and went. Vast areas of ocean froze, then thawed as global temperatures shifted over millions of years. These environmental cycles tested life repeatedly, pushing organisms toward greater resilience and adaptability. Many species vanished, unable to survive extreme cold or changing chemical conditions. But those that endured became stronger, laying foundations for future diversity. During these ages, oceans often stretched farther than land. The continents we know today were still merging and separating in slow rhythmic cycles guided by mantle convection. Each supercontinent formation brought massive upheavals, volcanic eruptions, mountain building, and dramatic changes to global climate. And each breakup created new coastlines, shallow seas, and opportunities for life to expand in different directions. Most importantly, life was beginning to communicate. Cells exchanged chemicals that signaled danger, opportunity, and growth. They developed primitive immune responses, defending themselves against invasive genetic material. They learned to store information more reliably, strengthening the thread of inheritance that would carry biological memory through time. Even now, all life on Earth is deeply connected to those ancient oceans. Our cells contain structures that originated billions of years ago, passed down through an unbroken chain of ancestors. Our bodies carry the chemistry of ancient microbes, and the genetic legacy of organisms that once floated in warm seas under a dim red sky. As we study ancient rocks, we find traces of those early biological innovations preserved as microscopic patterns. Fossilized microbial mats reveal the shapes of organisms that built the first biological communities. Ancient minerals contain chemical signatures that record the increase of oxygen. Sedimentary layers mark the rise and fall of sea levels driven by shifting continents and climates. Through these records, we glimpse a world slowly becoming more complex. We see oceans becoming biological worlds, continents preparing to host life, and skies clearing under the breath of oxygen-producing microbes. When you look at a coastline today, shaped by waves and tides, you are seeing the continuation of processes that began billions of years ago. When you breathe, you inhale the legacy of the earliest photosynthetic organisms. When sunlight warms your skin, it touches molecules shaped by the chemistry of deep time. Everything around us carries the imprint of this ancient evolution. The air, the land, the water, and every living thing share a common history written in layers of stone and sequences of DNA. Earth was no longer a world ruled by fire alone. It had become a world ruled by time measured in oceans and sediment, in slow shifts of continents, and in the patient unfolding of life. A world that had taken shape through fire was now reshaped by water and biology, moving steadily toward an age when life would redefine the planet again, this time in forms that could finally be seen. For billions of years, Earth remained a world almost entirely shaped by oceans and the silent workings of microscopic life. The surface of continents, still barren rock, waited patiently while evolution continued beneath waves that stretched across most of the planet. It was a time of slow transformations, subtle forces, and quiet changes that would eventually prepare the world for visible life. But for now, everything significant happened beneath water that hid its mysteries from the empty land above. Deep within the oceans, simple organisms were increasing in diversity. They consumed minerals, sunlight, and chemical energy released from the deep earth. As their populations expanded, their presence shaped the chemistry of water and air, slowly changing the planet through processes that were invisible on the surface. By now, oxygen in the atmosphere had reached levels significant enough to alter everything that came after. Oxygen was both a gift and a danger. For organisms adapted to early Earth conditions, oxygen was poisonous, corrosive, and destructive. Many of the earliest microbial species struggled to survive as oxygen accumulated, forcing them into deeper, oxygen-free waters. But other organisms evolved to use oxygen as a powerful new energy source, giving them a tremendous advantage over their ancient relatives. This transition, known as the Great Oxygenation Event, reshaped not only life, but the very structure of Earth. Iron dissolved in the oceans rusted and settled onto the seafloor, forming massive deposits of iron ore that still supply the world today. These rocks, banded with layers of iron and silica, became geological records of a time when oceans transformed from oxygen-poor to oxygen-rich. Above the oceans, something else was quietly taking shape. The sky, once heavy with volcanic gases, gradually cleared as oxygen reacted with methane and carbon dioxide. Clouds formed more regularly, storms became less severe, and the atmosphere grew thick enough to shield the surface from harsh ultraviolet radiation. For the first time, sunlight reached the continents regularly. The surface was still empty, nothing more than rock and sand, but it was changing. Wind carved patterns across stone, rain dissolved minerals into rivers, and erosion built valleys and plains. Even without life, Earth's landscapes were slowly preparing themselves for something they had never hosted before. Meanwhile, deep within the oceans, evolution accelerated. Organisms developed internal structures to process oxygen and store energy. Some became larger and more efficient, using energy far more effectively than earlier cells. These advanced cells, known as eukaryotes, represented another monumental step forward: complexity itself. Unlike their simpler ancestors, these new cells contained DNA protected inside nuclei, allowing for more efficient genetic storage and reproduction. They also contained internal structures, organelles, that allowed them to perform several tasks at the same time. This multitasking ability laid the foundation for future complexity, making possible every large organism that would eventually appear on Earth. Eukaryotic cells merged with ancient bacteria, keeping them as internal energy sources rather than consuming them. These bacteria eventually became mitochondria, the energy centers of complex cells, and even today, every cell in your body contains the descendants of those ancient organisms living deep within. This extraordinary cooperation between ancient lineages was one of the most significant evolutionary events in the history of life. Without it, life might never have risen beyond microscopic simplicity, but with it, complexity became inevitable. As oceans filled with new forms of life, Earth entered a long period of balance. Oxygen slowly increased, climate stabilized, and water. Temperatures grew more consistent. Ice ages still occurred from time to time, freezing vast regions and forcing organisms into extreme conditions. But each environmental shift prepared life to survive future changes, strengthening evolutionary resilience with every challenge. Over unimaginable spans of time, eukaryotic cells developed into simple multicellular organisms, life made not of single cells, but of many cells working together. These early multicellular life forms were tiny, soft-bodied, and rarely fossilized, but evidence of them remains in ancient sediments that preserve their shapes and patterns. They formed colonies on shallow seafloors, building simple communities that resembled thin films of living fabric woven across ocean beds. The oceans, once nearly empty, now supported ecosystems rich with microscopic complexity. Tiny predators hunted smaller organisms, defensive strategies evolved. Chemical signaling allowed species to coordinate behavior. This was the beginning of ecological interaction: competition, cooperation, predation, and survival. Although invisible from above, these processes created pressures that pushed life toward innovation, preparing the world for something far more dramatic. But change, even great change, takes time measured in millions of years. Earth was patient, and so was life. The continents were still drifting, colliding, and reshaping ocean basins. Mountain ranges rose and eroded over geological ages, while volcanic activity continued beneath every shifting tectonic plate. Above the water, clouds drifted quietly over lifeless land. Storms carved river valleys through stone. Winds gathered grains of sand that formed early dunes across barren surfaces. The atmosphere thickened, becoming more stable with every geological cycle, and gradually the world moved toward a new stage. At the time, Earth looked peaceful from above, but beneath oceans, evolution was preparing something extraordinary. Organisms were slowly developing specialized tissues, internal support structures, and biological systems capable of movement. Some evolved primitive nervous systems, allowing them to sense light and pressure. Others developed muscles to swim or crawl slowly across the seafloor. These innovations, though still simple, were the first steps toward the vast diversity of forms that will one day populate every ocean and every landmass. From the quiet depths of ancient seas, life was preparing for its first great expansion. Meanwhile, Earth's magnetic field strengthened as the core continued to cool, creating a powerful shield against solar radiation. This allowed the atmosphere to retain thick layers of gases without being stripped away by the solar wind. In turn, a stable atmosphere allowed surface temperatures to remain suitable for liquid water. Liquid water, one of the most precious substances in the universe, covered nearly 70% of the planet, acting as a global cradle that protected and nurtured every form of emerging life. Without water, the world would have remained a barren sphere of rock. But with water, oceans became laboratories of complexity, producing life that would one day reshape the planet in ways no volcano ever could. During this long quiet, Earth slowly cured itself of its earliest chaos. The violent world of molten rock had become a world of deep oceans. The poisonous atmosphere had become breathable for future life. The crust had strengthened, continents had stabilized, and winds sculpted empty landscapes that were waiting silently for the arrival of something new. For almost 2 billion years, Earth remained a world ruled by microorganisms alone. But during that unimaginable stretch of time, every necessary foundation was laid. The continents were built, the oceans were stabilized, the atmosphere was transformed from toxic gases into breathable air. Life had learned to harness sunlight, build complex cells, cooperate chemically, and survive extreme conditions. It had learned resilience, adaptation, and persistence. Every environmental challenge had prepared organisms for the next, shaping evolution slowly but relentlessly. Even now, beneath modern seas, ancient lineages still survive, microbes that remember Earth's earliest oceans. Some live near hydrothermal vents, just as their ancestors did more than 3 billion years ago. Others live in oxygen-poor environments, avoiding the atmosphere that once threatened their existence. The story of ancient Earth survives in them, carried through unbroken chains of inheritance stretching to the present moment. If we could travel back in time and stand beside those ancient oceans, we would see nothing remarkable on the surface. The sky would seem quiet, the waves slow, the continents empty. But beneath the surface, evolution was building the foundations of every animal, every plant, every ecosystem, and eventually every human that would walk the Earth. The quiet ages, though uneventful from a distance, were some of the most important in the history of the planet. Without them, life would never have progressed beyond microscopic existence. Without oxygen, complex life would never have evolved. Without stable climate, ecosystems would never have expanded. Without plate tectonics, continents would never have formed. Everything that exists now depended on the slow work of deep time. Time measured not in years or centuries, but in oceans, mountains, and planetary rhythms moving far beneath the surface. Earth was ready, life was ready, evolution was ready. Something extraordinary was coming, something that would finally make life visible. For billions of years, Earth remained a world where life existed almost entirely unseen. Oceans were filled with microscopic complexity, yet nothing large swam beneath the waves and nothing at all moved across land. But slowly, across long stretches of time, Earth approached one of the most dramatic turning points in biological history. The silent world of microorganisms was about to give way to a world filled with visible creatures. Creatures capable of movement, sensation, interaction, and transformation. This monumental shift began in ancient oceans more than 540 million years ago, during a mysterious interval known today as the Cambrian period. Before this time, the fossil record is sparse, dominated by simple and soft-bodied organisms that rarely preserved well in rock. But suddenly, in geological terms, the oceans exploded with an astonishing diversity of new life forms. Scientists call this phenomenon the Cambrian explosion, not because it occurred quickly by human standards, but because so many new organisms appeared in such a relatively short geological window. Within a span of roughly 20 to 30 million years, a moment in deep time, nearly every major animal group emerged, including ancestors of insects, worms, mollusks, arthropods, and vertebrates. The oceans transformed from quiet microbial realms into crowded dynamic ecosystems filled with strange and extraordinary creatures. Some crawled along seafloors, others swam through open waters using fins and flaps that had never existed before. These animals developed eyes to see predators and prey. They evolved exoskeletons to protect soft bodies. They built internal structures capable of supporting movement and complex digestion. Everything changed. Perhaps the most profound innovation of the Cambrian period was the development of hard body parts, shells, teeth, spines, and skeletons. These structures allowed organisms not only to survive predation, but also to leave fossilized remains behind. Suddenly, Earth's geological layers became filled with evidence of life, permanent impressions of ancient creatures preserved in stone. We can still see those remains today. In regions such as the Burgess Shale in Canada, astonishing fossils reveal the delicate forms of Cambrian animals frozen forever, their soft tissues preserved by rapid burial and unique chemical conditions. These fossils show creatures unlike anything living now: spiked worms, segmented arthropods, weird filter feeders, and early forms of animals that would one day dominate the planet. It was during this period that the earliest ancestors of vertebrates emerged, animals that would eventually give rise to fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and humans. Tiny changes deep within ancient oceans set the stage for every future creature with a backbone, including every person alive today. One of the reasons life transformed so dramatically during this time was the continued rise of oxygen in the atmosphere and oceans. Higher oxygen allowed more efficient metabolism, enabling larger and more active organisms. It also strengthened protective ozone in the upper atmosphere, shielding the surface from ultraviolet radiation. With increased protection, life could safely move closer to sunlight and evolve new capabilities without constant genetic damage. Another reason was ecological interaction. For the first time, organisms actively hunted one another on a large scale. Predation drove rapid evolution. Animals that developed better eyes could find prey more effectively. Animals that developed thicker shells could survive predator attacks. These evolutionary arms races created diversity faster than ever before. This period also saw the rise of complex nervous systems. Organisms developed neural pathways capable of processing information, allowing them to sense light, movement, and chemical signals. These early nervous systems were primitive compared to those in modern animals, but they represented a huge biological leap from the simple chemical responses of microbial ancestors. At the same time, ecosystems became structurally complex. Some animals burrowed into sediment, reshaping sea floors. Others built reefs from calcium carbonate, forming habitats that supported entire communities. The Cambrian seas became layered environments, with organisms living at different depths, building ecological levels that spread life across the water column. Still, everything remained confined to the oceans. The land above was barren rock, lifeless, silent, and untouched. No plants, no insects, no animals had yet attempted the dangerous journey from water to dry land. But beneath the waves, evolution prepared life for that future challenge. One day, long after the Cambrian period ended, organisms would crawl out of oceans and transform the continents forever. But for now, life remained in the sea, exploring possibilities beneath waves and currents. As the Cambrian period continued, Earth experienced dramatic environmental changes. Shifts in sea levels created shallow marine shelves where sunlight reached the ocean floor, allowing photosynthetic organisms to thrive. These regions supported dense populations of animals, and over time, continental drifting reshaped coastlines, opening new habitats to expanding life. Meanwhile, plate tectonics continued to build mountains beneath oceans. Underwater ridges formed long chains of volcanic islands. Continents collided and broke apart repeatedly, altering currents and global climate. Each geological shift created new evolutionary pressures, forcing organisms to adapt or perish. Life became a story written not just by biology, but by geology. The motion of continents, the chemistry of oceans, the temperature of the atmosphere, all these forces shaped evolution. They determined where species lived, what they became, and how ecosystems formed. Even today, the fossil record of the Cambrian period remains incomplete. Many organisms were soft-bodied and left no trace behind. Others decomposed rapidly, leaving only faint impressions in sediment that hardened long after they disappeared. Yet enough fossils exist to show a world transformed by evolution's creative power. When we look into Cambrian fossils, we see some of the earliest complex morphologies: segmented bodies, articulated limbs, compound eyes, and specialized mouthparts. We see creatures exploring movement, sensing, and predation for the first time. We see the ancestors of everything that followed. The Cambrian world was filled with wonders we can still hardly imagine. A creature called Opabenia had 5 eyes and a long, flexible proboscis. Another, Anomalocaris, grew large enough to become the first great predator of the seas, hunting trilobites and other early arthropods. Trilobites themselves flourished into thousands of species, crawling along sea floors for nearly 300 million years, before finally disappearing long after the Cambrian Age ended. These organisms created the first true food webs, systems where producers, consumers, and predators interacted in structured ways. They formed niches, competed for resources, and reshaped their environments. The oceans, once dominated by single-celled life, had become teeming worlds of movement and sensation. Yet this explosion of life did not last forever. Earth moved through cycles of environmental upheaval. At the end of the Cambrian period, extinction events wiped out many early groups, allowing new species to evolve in their place. Some lineages vanished without leaving descendants, others survived and diversified, eventually giving rise to the incredible array of animals that filled later geological periods. The Cambrian was not the end of evolution, it was the beginning of visible evolution. It marked the moment life became something we could recognize as animal, something capable of movement, behavior, and individuality. The oceans had awakened, and slowly, over millions of years, life continued to grow more complex. As the Cambrian period faded and new ages unfolded across the planet, life continued its quiet expansion beneath the seas. The oceans had become vibrant realms of predators and prey, forming ecosystems that shaped each geological era. But above the water, continents still waited untouched, silent and empty. No sound of insects, no rustling of leaves, no movement across vast plains of stone. Earth's surface remained a world without footsteps. Yet deep within coastal waters, a quiet transformation was underway. Organisms were adapting to shallow marine environments where sunlight reached the sediment. Some developed structures that allowed them to anchor to rock. Others built tissues that resisted drying, preparing unknowingly for a journey beyond the sea. The first step toward land was made not by animals but by plants, descended from ancient algae that once floated freely in warm, shallow waters. These algae evolved mechanisms to bind themselves to sediment, forming mats that trapped minerals and built early soils. Over millions of years, these mats developed protective coatings, allowing them to survive brief exposure to air. Eventually, some algae developed simple root-like structures that held moisture long enough to withstand low tides. These were the earliest land plants, tiny, delicate organisms that spread slowly across bare rock, transforming continents grain by grain. When these first plants settled onto land, they began a planetary change that would reshape Earth forever. Through photosynthesis, they absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen directly into the atmosphere, accelerating the shift already started by ancient microbes in the sea. With more oxygen in the air, the sky slowly took on the composition familiar to us today. These early plants resembled mosses more than trees, forming low carpets across damp shorelines. They reproduced using spores that drifted in wind, allowing them to spread farther inland, following rain patterns and moisture. As they colonized rocks and soil, they broke minerals apart, creating new sediments that formed deeper soils capable of supporting even more complex vegetation. As continents greened slowly from the edges inward, another group of organisms began preparing unknowingly to follow. the ancestors of modern insects and arthropods. These creatures evolved from marine species that crawled along shallow sea floors. Gradually, they developed limbs capable of supporting movement above water, gills that could withstand brief exposure to air, and exoskeletons that prevented their bodies from drying out. The earliest land animals were primitive arthropods, millipede-like creatures that crawled through damp soil in search of nutrients. Their bodies remained close to the ground, where moisture levels were highest. They were small and fragile, dependent on plants for shelter and chemical environments. As plants spread farther inland, they changed the climate around them. By absorbing carbon dioxide, they cooled the planet, triggering climatic shifts that brought more frequent rainfall. Rain nourished growing plant communities, allowing vegetation to advance deeper into continents. Over millions of years, plants evolved vascular systems that transported water from roots to leaves, enabling them to grow taller. These early vascular plants formed the first primitive forests, clumps of towering vegetation resembling giant ferns and reed-like trees, thick with moisture and rich with life. Beneath these forests, insects evolved rapidly. Some learned to feed on plants directly, others fed on decaying matter. Still others hunted smaller creatures, forming complex terrestrial food webs for the first time in Earth's history. Life on land, once impossible, now became inevitable. As forests grew, they pulled tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, further reducing global temperatures. Massive coal deposits found today were formed from thick layers of plant material that accumulated and compressed under ancient swamps. Each layer records a chapter of Earth's greening process, preserving the carbon once stored in living forests. But plants and arthropods were not the only pioneers. Eventually, some fish developed lungs capable of extracting oxygen from air, allowing them to survive in shallow, oxygen-poor waters. Their fins grew stronger and more limb-like, allowing them to push across muddy surfaces. These early amphibians were the first vertebrates to venture onto land, using primitive limbs to navigate through dense plant growth and shallow coastal swamps. With the arrival of amphibians, the continents echoed with the world's first animal footsteps. They were awkward and slow on land, but their lungs allowed them to explore shallow watercourses rich with insects. Over time, they developed stronger bones, larger lungs, and limbs capable of supporting their weight. Still, amphibians remained tied to water for reproduction. Eggs needed moisture to survive, and young stages remained aquatic until fully formed. But evolution was patient. Over millions of years, some amphibians evolved reproductive systems that allowed them to lay eggs with protective shells, freeing them from constant dependence on watery environments. These amphibians became the first reptiles, animals fully adapted to life on land, capable of surviving far from oceans and rivers. They spread across continents, exploiting environments inaccessible to their amphibian ancestors. Soon, reptiles diversified into a vast array of forms. Some evolved heavy armor, some developed wings, and some grew into predators far larger than any amphibian had ever been. These early reptiles dominated land ecosystems for tens of millions of years, paving the way for future giants that would eventually rule Earth. Meanwhile, insect evolution accelerated alongside plants. Early insects developed wings, becoming the first animals capable of flight. These wings allowed them to travel faster, escape predators, and migrate long distances in search of food. With flight came new ecological possibilities: pollination, scavenging, and aerial predation. As forests expanded, Earth produced more oxygen than at any previous time. During the Carboniferous period, oxygen levels rose higher than at any point in the last 600 million years, reaching nearly 35% of the atmosphere. Higher oxygen allowed insects to grow to enormous sizes. Dragonflies with wingspans longer than modern hawks soared over ancient forests, hunting prey across humid skies. Millipedes grew several feet long. The world became a place of giant arthropods, thriving under oxygen-rich conditions that would never again be equaled. Forests also created stable terrestrial climates by releasing moisture into the air, forming new rainfall patterns across continents. As vegetation spread, weather systems changed, supporting ecosystems previously impossible. Insects pollinated plants, plants fed herbivores, herbivores supported predators. For the first time, terrestrial environments contained complete interconnected food webs. As reptiles spread across continents, ecosystems diversified. Some reptiles returned to water and evolved into early marine reptiles, dominating coastal oceans. Others developed herbivorous diets, feeding on ferns and early conifers. Still others became specialized predators, forming the first complex terrestrial hunting strategies. Meanwhile, plate tectonics continued reshaping Earth. Continents drifted slowly, colliding into massive supercontinents like Pangaea, where reptile ecosystems spread across immense land masses. Climatic extremes challenged species, pushing evolution toward greater adaptability. By the end of the Paleozoic era, reptiles had become the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. Insects ruled forests and skies, and plants covered vast continental regions. Life had finally conquered land. This transformation was not sudden by human standards. It took hundreds of millions of years. But in the timeline of Earth, it represented a rapid expansion of biology into environments once impossible to inhabit. Everything that lived on land, trees, insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, descended from ancient pioneers that crawled onto rock near shallow seas long before forests ever existed. Their descendants reshaped continents, altered climates, and paved the way for even larger beings. The world was preparing for a future dominated by giants, and soon Earth would enter an age where the largest animals to ever walk the land would rise, rule, and eventually fall, leaving behind only their bones and the stories written in stone. After the great devastation that marked the end of the Permian period, the world slowly began to heal, but nothing returned exactly as it had been. Forests sprouted again from scorched landscapes, strange new reptiles explored coastlines, and the air grew thick with unfamiliar life. In this transformed world, small, fast-moving creatures walked quietly across the vast unified landmass we now call Pangaea, unaware that evolution was preparing them for a future far beyond their fragile early existence. These early dinosaurs were not yet rulers. They were insignificant compared to other reptiles, overshadowed by massive amphibians and powerful predators that dominated rivers and swamps. Yet hidden inside their small bodies were innovations that would eventually change the natural history of Earth itself. Their legs, positioned beneath their bodies rather than sprawling outward like earlier reptiles, allowed them to run more efficiently. Their lungs were adapted for enhanced oxygen exchange, enabling them to travel farther with less energy. They were survivors, resilient and persistent, and it was that quiet resilience that would eventually carry them into dominance. As millions of years passed, Pangaea's climates began to shift. The supercontinent stretched from pole to pole, creating extremes of seasonal temperature. Summers could scorch land for months at a time, while winters brought dry, cold winds sweeping across endless plains. For early dinosaurs, survival required adaptability. Slowly, species with greater endurance began to thrive, while those bound to ancient wetlands struggled as climate and coastlines changed around them. Yet the event that truly opened the door for dinosaurs came suddenly and with brutal force. Around 201 million years ago, massive volcanic eruptions exploded along rifts within Pangaea, filling the sky with ash and choking the atmosphere with carbon dioxide. Oceans acidified, temperatures crashed and then soared, and ecosystems collapsed in quick succession. Species that had dominated for tens of millions of years vanished almost overnight, but dinosaurs, already built for endurance, emerged from this crisis stronger, more numerous, and ready to expand into roles nature had abruptly left vacant. their transformation was rapid. They began as small-bodied creatures and quickly diversified into countless forms. Some evolved long legs and long tails, perfect for running through open plains. Others developed powerful jaws and serrated teeth designed for tearing flesh. Many grew larger, taking advantage of new plant growth across freshly formed floodplains. As new oceans opened between fragments of Pangaea, climates diversified and life evolved with astonishing creativity. By the Jurassic period, dinosaurs dominated nearly every corner of the land. Towering plant eaters roamed ancient river valleys, and agile predators stalked them through fern-filled forests that stretched across entire continents. The world was warm and wet, forests dense and tropical, and life flourished under humid skies filled with insects and the scent of resin-rich trees. Some of the most extraordinary dinosaurs were the sauropods, enormous plant eaters with necks long enough to reach the tops of ancient conifers. These giants, such as Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus, grew to sizes no land animal would ever again achieve. Their immense bodies moved slowly across the land like mobile mountains, shaping ecosystems around them. Because of their size, predators could not attack them easily, and their height allowed them access to food unreachable by others. Evolution responded by producing larger carnivores, capable of challenging even the most massive prey. The early Jurassic was shaped by Allosaurus, a formidable predator with razor-sharp teeth and keen senses. Later, during the Cretaceous period, Tyrannosaurus rex would become the ultimate hunter in many prehistoric landscapes, towering over its prey with jaws strong enough to crush bone. Yet dinosaurs were far more complex than the giant skeletons found in museums might suggest. Many were warm-blooded, many had feathers. Some may have hunted in coordinated groups, while others cared for their offspring long after hatching. Fossils reveal nests, brooding behavior, and evidence of parental protection. The age of dinosaurs was not simply an age of monsters, but an age of remarkable biological experimentation. Feather-like structures first evolved for insulation or display, and only later became tools for gliding and eventually powered flight. From these feathered dinosaurs emerged the earliest birds, small creatures that darted through the air with wings that once belonged to their reptilian ancestors. Flight allowed them to escape predators, explore new habitats, and eventually spread across nearly every environment on the planet. Today, the birds we see in forests and gardens are direct descendants of the dinosaurs that ruled ancient skies. As continents continued their slow drift across the mantle, climates shifted dramatically. The breakup of Pangaea formed new oceans, reshaped coastlines, and created isolated ecosystems where dinosaurs evolved along separate pathways. The world became a patchwork of tropical islands, inland seas, vast deserts, and lush coastal forests. Flowering plants appeared during the mid-Cretaceous, bringing new colors, new scents, and entirely new relationships between plants and animals. Early bees and insects began pollinating these blossoms, spreading forests farther and creating food sources unlike anything seen before. Dinosaurs adapted quickly, evolving specialized beaks, teeth, and digestive systems to take advantage of this new botanical world. Forests that once consisted mostly of conifers and cycads now transformed into vibrant landscapes filled with flowering trees and shrubs. Beneath the surface of Earth, tectonic forces never rested. Volcanic eruptions continued to shape coastlines, while mountain chains slowly rose and eroded under the constant pressure of shifting plates. Inland seas occasionally spread across continents, providing habitat for enormous marine reptiles such as ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. In the skies, pterosaurs soared with wingspans rivaling small modern aircraft. The planet was alive not only with dinosaurs, but with a symphony of evolving species that filled oceans, rivers, forests, and sky. Every ecosystem contained its own specialized life forms, and every region held evolving species uniquely adapted to their environment. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs ruled Earth with extraordinary success. They endured climate fluctuations, shifting continents, and massive volcanic events. Their survival was not a brief chapter, but a vast era stretching through deep time. Yet even the greatest evolutionary success cannot resist the forces of planetary catastrophe. Near the end of the Cretaceous, Earth encountered an event that would end the age of giants forever. A massive asteroid struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing a shockwave beyond human imagination. The impact ignited global firestorms, vaporized enormous regions of land, and sent billions of tons of dust and debris into the sky. Sunlight dimmed, temperatures plunged, and plant life collapsed. With plants dying, herbivores starved, and with herbivores gone, predators soon followed. Only smaller, adaptable creatures survived the harsh aftermath. In this quiet void, after the roaring of giants ceased, small mammals that had spent millions of years avoiding dinosaurs emerged into a world suddenly emptied of its rulers. Their era was just beginning, yet even in their extinction, dinosaurs left behind a legacy that shaped everything that followed. Their fossils preserved the blueprints of ancient ecosystems. Their descendants continued into the skies as birds. Their evolutionary innovations, endurance, warm blood, feathers, and complex behavior became foundations for species long after them. The age of dinosaurs teaches us that life on Earth is shaped not only by survival, but by transformation, and that every era, no matter how dominant, eventually yields to the next. The ground we walk on still holds their bones. The air still carries the descendants of their wings, and every stone that preserves their history is a silent witness to the time when giants walked the earth and shaped the world that would one day become our home. The disappearance of the dinosaurs did not mark the end of Earth's transformation, but rather opened a new chapter of extraordinary change and unexpected evolution. The quiet landscapes that emerged after the asteroid impact were filled not with giants, but with small creatures moving cautiously through a world still recovering from catastrophe. In the dusty aftermath, soot and ash settled slowly into the soil, oceans cleared, and the sun gradually returned. Surviving plants began to reclaim the land, spreading across plains and transforming the barren surface into green once more. Small mammals, which had lived in shadows and survived by hiding, now explored a world without towering predators. Their ability to eat diverse foods, from insects to seeds, gave them an advantage in the unstable climates that followed. For millions of years, Earth felt young again, reinventing itself one slow season at a time. In this newly opened ecological space, mammals began evolving rapidly. Some grew larger bodies for grazing, others developed sharp teeth for hunting, and many expanded into ancient niches once ruled by dinosaurs. Forests became home to early primates moving carefully through branches, learning to grasp, climb, and see with forward-facing eyes that allowed depth perception. Their minds grew more curious, their hands more capable, and their ability to communicate expanded slowly across generations. The history of mammals was a history of adaptation, of constant experimentation driven by the ever-changing world around them. While ancient oceans still held giant reptiles and new species of sharks patrolled warming seas, the land itself became a cradle for new intelligence. Volcanic activity continued beneath the shifting crust, raising new mountains and carving valleys where rivers would eventually flow. Climate oscillated dramatically across millions of years, sometimes freezing entire continents, sometimes melting polar regions into vast wetlands. Ice ages came and went like breath, sculpting Earth's surface into sharp cliffs, deep fjords, and rolling plains of fertile soil. Glaciers ground rock into fine dust that would later nourish forests and grasslands. With every shift in temperature, species either adapted or vanished. Evolution never paused, and nature reinvented itself continuously. Among the countless forms that emerged, early human ancestors eventually walked upright. Not at once, not as a single moment of transformation, but through slow adjustments in bones, muscles, and posture, shaped by landscapes that required walking long distances to find food. Fire, discovered and harnessed over countless generations, became a tool of survival. It warmed cold nights, protected against predators, and eventually transformed raw food into nourishment more easily digested by growing brains. The human mind expanded like a universe awakening to itself. Stone tools, once simple flakes chipped from river pebbles, evolved into spears, axes, and eventually into knowledge carried in memory rather than instinct alone. Earth continued to change as continents drifted into their modern positions. Australia separated from Antarctica, carrying marsupials that evolved into entirely unique animals. India collided with Asia, lifting the Himalayas high into the sky. Volcanoes shaped the ring of fire around the Pacific, building chains of islands that would one day host entire civilizations. The planet was alive beneath human feet long before humans ever understood its power. Every mountain, every valley, every shifting coastline reminded early humans that Earth was not a silent world, but a world in motion, constantly rewriting itself through fire, pressure, and time. Through ice ages, humans migrated across continents, learning to survive harsh climates, crossing land bridges now buried beneath oceans, and spreading across nearly every corner of the planet. The last great glaciation sculpted North America and Europe, carving deep basins that would later fill with lakes and covering landscapes beneath thousands of meters of ice. When the ice melted, gigantic floods reshaped whole regions almost overnight, creating fertile plains and river deltas that would one day support farming and villages. Humanity emerged into this warmer world with new skills: hunting, cooperation, language, and eventually agriculture. For the first time in Earth's long history, a species began not only to adapt to the planet, but to reshape it deliberately. Humans cleared forests, planted crops, and built settlements near rivers, carved long before by geological forces they would not understand for thousands of years. Civilizations rose along the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, and the Yellow River, each rooted in fertile soils created by ancient floods, volcanic ash, and glacial sediment. Entire cultures unknowingly built their lives on landscapes prepared by geological history that stretched back through unimaginable ages. Human history, though vast to us, occupies only a thin surface layer atop deep time. As societies advanced, they began to wonder where mountains came from, why earthquakes shook the ground, and why some stones held glittering minerals. They built mythologies to explain erupting volcanoes, believing gods or spirits lived within them. They studied the stars that had once forged the minerals in their jewelry and tools. Without knowing it, humans were observing echoes of cosmic processes. Every metal they shaped into weapons or art had been born in ancient stars or delivered by meteorites long before Earth cooled. Every grain of soil beneath their feet was once volcanic rock or seabed silt. The world they inhabited was not merely a stage, but a living record of transformation. Eventually, scientific insight revealed the hidden workings of Earth. Plate tectonics, once unimaginable, became a grand explanation tying continents, earthquakes, volcanoes, mountains, and ocean floors into one unified mechanism. Humans discovered that the ground beneath them was not permanent but drifting. They learned that mountains rose not by magic but through collisions of massive crustal plates. They uncovered fossils buried in rock layers, revealing ancient oceans where deserts now stretched and lush forests where frozen tundra lay silent. Earth became a storybook, its chapters written in stone rather than ink. Yet even with knowledge, humans remained small in the face of Earth's power. Volcanoes erupted with terrifying force, earthquakes shattered cities, and tsunamis surged across coastlines without warning. These events, while devastating, reminded humanity of its humble place in nature's larger history. But humans adapted. They built tools to measure tremors, satellites to track storms, and instruments to listen to the slow heartbeat of Earth itself. Through technology, they learned not to control the planet, but to understand it just enough to survive its cycles. The rocks humans mined for resources were not just materials, but memories of deep geological history. The copper wiring in their devices came from ores deposited by ancient hydrothermal vents. The gasoline powering their vehicles originated from sediments rich with the remains of vanished marine life. Even the concrete in modern cities came from limestone formed from coral reefs built in tropical seas long before humans existed. In every structure, every tool, every object, ancient processes continued to shape human existence. As Earth moved into an era dominated by human activity, new questions emerged. How long would ice sheets endure under warming climate? How would oceans respond to atmospheric changes? Would volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts again rewrite the history of life? The story of Earth was far from finished. The core still swirled with molten iron, generating the magnetic field that protected the surface from solar storms. The mantle still flowed like putty, driving continents slowly across the globe. Volcanoes still erupted, sometimes violently enough to affect global climate. Earth remained dynamic, alive, restless beneath its thin crust where humans built their civilizations. The future of the planet lies not in a final ending, but in endless transformation. In millions of years, continents will drift again toward new configurations. New mountain ranges will rise, while old ones crumble into sand. Oceans will open and close, forests will expand and contract, and climates will shift dramatically as they always have. Human presence, whether temporary or lasting, is merely one more chapter in a story written not in centuries, but in eons. The ground will remember. The rocks will preserve every change long after human memory fades. Even now, deep inside the Earth, minerals are forming that future civilizations may someday unearth. Lava cools into new rock that will eventually rise to become mountains unknown today. Sediments carried by rivers settle into layers that will someday be read like pages of a book by eyes that may not be human. Beneath the surface, iron flows around the core, creating a magnetic shield that shifts and flips over time. Every pulse of molten material affects the compass needle, the auroras, and the invisible protection that makes life on Earth possible. Looking at the night sky, humans see stars shining with light that began its journey millions of years ago, through space filled with dust from ancient supernovas. Dust that also falls onto Earth at this very moment, adding tiny grains of cosmic material to the soil. The universe continues to write its story onto the planet. Every meteor, every comet, every particle of light carries evidence of origins far beyond Earth itself. In this cosmic context, geology is not only the study of Earth, but of our connection to everything that exists beyond. The ground beneath humanity's feet is not merely a surface. It is a vast archive of memory. Rocks contain stories of oceans older than continents, volcanoes that reshaped life, ice ages that sculpted entire landscapes, and impacts that changed evolution forever. Every time the wind blows dust across oceans, every time waves erode coastlines, every time mountains rise or fall, the planet continues its quiet transformation. Human life is brief compared to the scale of geological time, yet humans are part of this ongoing story, shaped by forces older than the Earth itself. The planet's long future stretches beyond imagination. New species will emerge long after humans are gone. New ecosystems will form from ancient remnants. Perhaps another intelligent species will one day read the same stones humans read today and wonder who walked before them. Perhaps they will discover fossils of birds descended from dinosaurs, or trace the layers of ash that recorded human influence. Every piece of Earth is a chapter waiting to be revealed, each fragment of rock a witness to time. As the continents slowly shift toward new arrangements, the Earth continues its ancient rhythm. The mantle flows beneath, oceans move above, mountains breathe with geological pulse, and life adapts endlessly. Everything that exists is part of this cycle, from the smallest grain of sand to the largest galaxy. The world beneath our feet holds a memory deeper than human thought, older than the solar system itself. And long after this age passes, long after human voices fall silent, Earth will continue its slow, patient transformation, remembering every moment written in stone. The story of Earth does not end in the present moment we stand within, for everything around us continues to shift in ways we cannot always see. Beneath every city and every coastline, the crust moves slowly, stretching in some places and compressing in others, drifting by centimeters each year, but reshaping continents over millions. Mountains that appear timeless will one day crumble into sand, while new ranges quietly begin beneath unseen oceans. The tectonic plates, immense and patient, glide over the mantle like rafts over deep currents, guided by heat that rises from the core, a core that still glows with the memory of Earth's violent birth. Every earthquake is a whisper from that deep interior, a reminder of forces older than fossils and older even than oceans. The planet exists in ceaseless motion, and though human lives seem brief against this vastness, each moment contributes to the ever-changing surface of the world. Future ages will bring climates humans may never witness. Ice will again advance from polar regions, carving fresh valleys, forming new glaciers that grind rock into rich soils. The continents may drift together once more, merging into another supercontinent where mountains rise higher than any today. Vast deserts could form at the heart of these new landmasses, while warm, shallow seas cover what is now farmland and forest. Or perhaps oceans themselves will shift and widen as rifts grow deeper across the seafloor, creating new worlds beneath expanding waters. Even the magnetic field may reverse again, slowly at first, then completely, realigning invisible lines that guide migrating animals and shape the auroras that shimmer across polar skies. That shift will take centuries, unfolding so gradually that only instruments will notice, while life adapts, as it always has, to a planet that never stops moving. Volcanoes will continue to erupt as long as the planet retains heat within its molten heart. Some eruptions will be small, building gentle cones that shape islands and fertile soil. Others may be colossal, altering global climates and rewriting evolutionary paths. Lakes deep in volcanic regions will accumulate gases over centuries, waiting quietly until some disturbance releases them in sudden deadly clouds. Hydrothermal vents will continue to form beneath oceans, feeding strange organisms that shimmer with chemical light. Entire ecosystems unknown to humans may flourish in darkness for millions of years before ever being discovered. Coral reefs may retreat as sea levels rise, then advance again long after current species are replaced by new forms of life. Each change will leave traces in sediment, fossilizing the memory of these ancient waters into layers that future observers may read like paragraphs from Earth's unfolding autobiography. Over vast stretches of time, humanity itself may change. Perhaps future generations will adapt to climates warmer or cooler than today, relocating to regions shaped by shifting coastlines or rising seas. They may learn to harness geothermal energy that rises from beneath volcanic soil, or discover minerals deep within mountains formed long after our era. They may build cities on sediments that did not exist when humans first walked upright, or develop new ways of reading fossils, reconstructing lives of species that emerged in ages yet to come. The minerals beneath their feet may contain traces of human influence embedded in stone long after buildings crumble and languages fade from memory. Even if our species changes, migrates, or eventually disappears, Earth will continue its quiet transformation, preserving the memory of every age in layers of rock that wait patiently beneath the surface. Far beyond the reach of present knowledge, The sun itself shapes the future of the Earth. Over billions of years, it will grow brighter, warming the planet until oceans slowly evaporate and the atmosphere thins. Long before that distant time, life as we know it may evolve into forms unimaginable today or shift to new habitats deep beneath oceans or underground. Perhaps intelligent beings far in the future will search for traces of the civilization that once observed stars from the surface and wondered where everything came from. They may uncover fossils of animals that lived in our time, or discover minerals formed from our technological age, or find remnants of ancient weather patterns preserved in cave formations that record rain long vanished. In this distant future, the Earth itself may drift beyond its present orbit, pulled by interactions within the solar system, or cooled by volcanic cycles far beyond the span of human epochs. Even after the final breath of our star, fragments of Earth may survive as asteroids or dust drifting through space, carrying tiny pieces of geological memory into the dark. Those pieces may someday drift across the galaxy, just as grains of stardust once drifted into the primordial cloud that formed the Earth. Perhaps they will join the formation of distant worlds, adding trace minerals to planets that orbit new suns. In this endless cycle of creation and destruction, the atoms that compose every rock, every mountain, every living creature continue to transform across cosmic timescales. Matter remembers in its own way, through elements forged in exploding stars and shaped by gravity into planets that host oceans and life. The story of Earth becomes the story of the universe itself, written across time so vast that even the oldest mountains appear youthful. Standing in the present, it is easy to imagine that the world is still and familiar. But beneath our feet, continents drift, oceans shift, and the deep interior churns with heat as ancient as the solar system. The sand on beaches is ground from mountains that once stood enormous against prehistoric skies. The limestone beneath cities formed from skeletons of coral reefs that bloomed in ancient tropical seas. The metals in human tools and jewelry come from meteorites that fell billions of years ago, delivering gold and platinum forged in supernovae beyond imagination. Every pebble contains a history older than any civilization, older than any species, older than life itself. The rocks are not silent. They carry memory in atoms arranged through pressure, heat, and time. Even the air we breathe is shaped by deep geological cycles. Carbon captured in ancient seas now swirls through the atmosphere, nourishing forests and oceans. Oxygen released by early microbes still fills our lungs with the legacy of the first life to change the planet. Every cloud contains water evaporated from oceans that once covered continents and may do so again. Rainfall across mountains carved valleys where rivers now flow, carrying sediment from peaks to deltas where fertile soils support ecosystems that will someday fossilize into rock. In this continuous exchange of material and energy, the planet breathes through every cycle, every storm, every quiet fall of snow in polar night. The future holds continents humans have not imagined, landscapes sculpted by earthquakes that have not yet happened, and oceans expanded by tectonic rifts still forming along the seafloor. Forests will migrate with climate, deserts will shift their borders, and species not yet evolved will adapt to environments shaped by forces operating beneath the surface. Perhaps ice sheets will return as the planet cools in far future cycles, spreading white plains across regions now filled with cities. Perhaps vast volcanic plateaus will rise again, flooding entire continents with lava that solidifies into rock thousands of meters thick. In every possibility, the Earth remains alive, shaped by heat from within and radiation from above, a balance of forces that has guided its story for billions of years and will continue to guide it long after present ages fade. Looking upward at night, the stars we see are reminders of the same cosmic origins that formed the planet. The heavier elements within Earth's core were created in ancient stellar explosions, scattered across space, and gathered into the forming solar system. Those same elements now exist within mountains, oceans, and in every living being that walks upon the crust. In this way, geology is not merely the study of Earth, it is the study of star stuff becoming stone, becoming life, and eventually returning to the cosmos. The transformation never ends. The universe folds upon itself through cycles of creation, shaping planets and stars, guiding evolution, and preserving memory within minerals, fossils, and dust. And so the story of Earth is both intimate and infinite, a narrative that includes every grain of sand, every volcanic eruption, and every quiet day in which nothing seems to change. It is a story written slowly through rock layers that stack like pages in a book, each chapter recorded in sediments that will someday rise and fall with continents long after current landscapes are gone. If one listens closely, it is possible to hear that story in the rustle of wind across stone, in the waves that grind cliffs into particles, and in the quiet pulse of the planet's magnetic field guiding invisible forces through the atmosphere. The Earth continues its ancient rhythm, and we, for a brief moment, move within it, a part of its memory, a chapter in its long unfolding tale that stretches quietly into the deep future, where new stories wait to be written in stone.